I always sat in the third row, center aisle. Right where she could see me. Every time the curtain opened, her little eyes would search the crowd until they found mine. And when they did, she'd smile, just a tiny smile, but it was ours. A quiet little signal that said, "I see you, Grandpa. You're here." That chair, that spot, became part of our story. Her school plays, holiday concerts, talent shows. I never missed one. Not even the year I had pneumonia. I just wore a heavier coat and brought cough drops. I wasn't going to let a little thing like illness keep me from seeing my granddaughter shine. So when the email came, simple, cold, and official, I read it 3 times, thinking I must have misunderstood. We kindly ask that Mr. Thompson not attend future school events, due to concerns raised by faculty and staff. Thank you for understanding. I sat back in my kitchen chair, the light from the window hitting my coffee just right, making it look warm. But it didn't feel warm. I forwarded the email to my daughter, thinking there had to be some mistake. Some mix-up. I expected a phone call. Maybe even an apology. Instead, she replied with just 5 words. "Let's talk about this later." That was 3 months ago. And now, the chair in the third row stays empty. Not because I forgot. Not because I gave up. But because I was asked, no, told, not to come. And the worst part? My daughter agreed. I wasn't always around. Not the way I should have been. When my daughter was growing up, I was the kind of father who provided, but rarely participated. Long hours. Overtime. Missed birthdays. I thought putting food on the table and a roof over their heads was enough. But life has a cruel way of teaching you about time, how it runs out before you even notice it slipping through your fingers. So when my granddaughter was born, something in me changed. I saw in her a second chance. A chance to be present. To do it differently. I bought her first pair of tiny shoes. I rocked her to sleep during colic nights so my daughter could rest. I learned the names of her stuffed animals and made up bedtime stories about them. Every time I looked at her, I saw the good that was still left in me. I was proud, not just of her, but of who I was becoming because of her. I showed up for everything. The school didn't have to send me reminders, I already knew the calendar by heart. I volunteered when they needed extra hands. I sat through entire puppet shows made with paper bags and glitter, just to clap for her part. Some of the other parents probably thought I was overdoing it. That I should leave space for her mom and dad. But I wasn't trying to take anyone's place. I was just trying to keep mine. Because after all the years I spent running on empty, missing the little things that turned into big regrets. This time, I wanted to be full. Present. Accounted for. And for a while, I thought I was. Her first performance was a Thanksgiving play. She was 5. She played a tree. Not a pilgrim, not a turkey. A tree. Just one of a dozen standing in the back with painted brown shirts and leaves taped to their arms. But to me, she was the most beautiful thing on that stage. She stood so still, lips pressed tight, eyes wide with focus, like she knew her role mattered. Like being a tree was just as important as any speaking part. And when the crowd laughed or clapped, she didn't break character. But I saw her glance toward me, quick and subtle, just to check if I was watching. Of course I was. I clapped louder than anyone. I brought her flowers afterward. She hugged me so hard I could barely breathe. That became our ritual. Every show, every recital, I brought flowers, sometimes daisies, sometimes whatever looked nicest at the corner store. We took pictures together, her sweaty from the stage lights, me beaming like I just witnessed a Broadway debut. It wasn't about the performance itself. It was about showing her that she mattered. That I saw her. That I was there, and I always would be. But that's the part that hurts now. Because those memories, those moments we built together, they feel broken. Like someone went back and cut them out of the story. Or worse, like they were never mine to hold in the first place. All it took was one message, one quiet agreement between adults behind closed doors, to erase what I thought was unshakable. Now when I look at the pictures we took after those shows, I don't just see joy. I see the beginning of something I didn't realize was ending. It didn't happen all at once. At first, it was subtle. Too subtle for someone like me to catch right away. A teacher who used to smile suddenly avoiding eye contact. A parent I chatted with in the parking lot crossing the street instead. The kind of shift you try to explain to yourself. Maybe they're just busy. Maybe I'm imagining it. But I wasn't. During one of the Christmas recitals, I brought a tray of cookies I'd baked myself, something I'd never done before. I thought it would be a nice gesture. I even added little labels, homemade by Grandpa T. The front desk lady took them with a tight smile, then placed them behind the counter. They never made it to the refreshment table. Later, I saw two mothers whispering near the auditorium doors. One of them looked directly at me, then turned away quickly like she'd been caught doing something wrong. That's when I started to notice the space. People were making room around me. Not in a polite way, but in a careful way. Like I was something to be avoided. A quiet discomfort followed me, even when no one said a word. And yet, my granddaughter never changed. She still ran into my arms after every performance. Still asked if I saw her on stage. Still tugged on my sleeve and said, "Did I do good, Grandpa?" She didn't see what the adults saw. Or maybe she did. But she didn't care. Either way, I held on to those moments like lifelines. Because deep down, I knew something was shifting, something I couldn't quite name yet. And no one was going to tell me. Not until it was too late. It was a Tuesday. Nothing special. I had just finished washing the dishes when I heard the email ping on my phone. I wiped my hands on a towel and picked it up. The subject line read, "Regarding school events." At first, I thought it was a newsletter or a schedule update. Something routine. But as I read the message, my chest tightened. "Dear Mr. Thompson, we appreciate your involvement and enthusiasm at school events. However, after internal discussions and concerns raised by members of the faculty, we kindly ask that you refrain from attending future student performances. Thank you for understanding." No explanation. No specifics. Just, "Don't come back." I stared at the screen for a long time. Read it again and again, trying to find a different meaning hidden between the lines. Trying to convince myself that it wasn't what it clearly was, a door being politely shut in my face. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just sat there in my kitchen, feeling like someone had knocked the air out of me. The next day, I went to the school. I asked to speak to the teacher who had sent the message. They told me she wasn't available. I asked when she might be. They told me she wouldn't be. I asked if I had done something wrong, if someone had complained, if there was any misunderstanding I could clear up. All I got were vague reassurances and phrases like "it's best for the learning environment" and some concerns were raised. No one would look me in the eye. I walked out of that building feeling smaller than I ever had in my life. Not because of what they said, but because of what they didn't. Because deep down, I knew they believed something about me. And they weren't going to let me explain otherwise. And the silence was louder than any accusation could have been. I waited 2 days before calling her. I didn't want to sound angry. I didn't want to accuse. I just wanted to understand. Surely, there was some misunderstanding. Some piece of the story I was missing. Maybe she hadn't even seen the email yet. When she picked up, her voice was calm, too calm. "Hey, Dad," she said, like nothing had happened. I told her about the message. I asked if she knew anything. There was a pause. Just long enough to let me know the answer before she said it out loud. "Yeah. I know." My throat tightened. "You knew?" "I was part of the discussion," she said quietly. That sentence. It changed everything. I asked her why. I asked what I had done. She hesitated, then started talking about how kids talk at school. About how some parents had brought up concerns. She never said what those concerns were. She just kept using that word, concerns. I told her I'd never done anything wrong. I told her all I've ever done was love that little girl with my whole heart. "I know, Dad," she said, almost gently. "But sometimes love isn't enough." That's when it hit me, this wasn't about a mistake. This wasn't a one-time issue. This was a quiet decision she had already made. She didn't fight for me. She didn't ask questions. She just agreed. To protect her daughter, she said. To avoid drama. To keep things smooth. And somehow, I had become the problem. I didn't yell. I didn't plead. I just sat with it. Because when your own child decides you're better kept at a distance, there's nothing left to say. Maybe that's what this is all about. The past. Mine isn't spotless. I'll admit that. I've made mistakes, some small, some that still wake me up at night. There were years when I drank too much. Years when I worked too late, came home too tired, and spoke too sharply. I wasn't abusive. I wasn't cruel. But I was distant. Cold, even. Especially with my daughter. She needed warmth, and I gave her structure. She wanted hugs, and I offered discipline. I told myself I was doing the right thing. That someday she'd understand. That someday, she'd thank me for teaching her how to survive. But maybe she never did. Maybe those years of distance never fully healed, even after I tried to become a better man. And maybe she's still carrying that pain. Quietly. Deeply. Like a splinter no one ever pulled out. I thought being a good grandfather would make up for being a flawed father. I thought if I loved her daughter fiercely and faithfully, she would see that I'd changed. That I'd learned. But maybe she doesn't want to remember the man I used to be. Maybe every time I show up, she sees not the man I am now, but the man I was then. And maybe the school didn't have to dig that deep. Maybe all it took was one whisper, one memory, one sideways glance. And she didn't stop them. She didn't stand up for me. Because sometimes, it's easier to bury the past, even if it means burying the people in it. There's a look people give you when they think they know who you are. Not because they've spoken to you. Not because you did anything wrong. But because someone said something once, and it stuck. Maybe it was a rumor. Maybe it was a mistake from decades ago. Maybe it's just the way you dress, or how you sit alone too often. But that look. It follows you. I've seen it before. In church, after the divorce. At work, after I came back from that brief leave they called medical, though everyone knew it was rehab. People don't ask questions when they think they already have answers. And I've lived long enough to know that once a story is told about you, true or not, it's almost impossible to take it back. I don't know what the school heard about me. I don't know if it came from a parent, a staff member, or maybe even from years ago when I had a bad spell and said things I regret. But I do know this, nobody asked me for my side. Nobody asked what I've done to rebuild my life. No one saw the daily routines I built to stay grounded. The therapy sessions. The volunteer work. The quiet, humble effort to become someone I can respect when I look in the mirror. I know I don't look like the grandfathers in the Hallmark movies. I've got a face that's been through some storms. Wrinkles in the wrong places. Hands that shake a little when I'm nervous. A voice that cracks when I'm trying too hard not to feel. But behind this face is a man who's done the work. Who's tried, really tried, to make peace with his past. Yet all it takes is one shadow, one whisper, one cautious glance. And suddenly, none of it matters. Because stigma doesn't care who you are today. It only remembers who you used to be. People say silence is suspicious. That if you don't defend yourself, you must be hiding something. But not every silence is guilt. Sometimes, it's exhaustion. Sometimes, it's heartbreak. And sometimes, it's love, twisted up in fear. There were so many times I could have spoken up. When I could have told the teacher, or the school board, or even the other parents, "You've got it wrong. Let me explain." But I didn't. Because I knew that the more I spoke, the more it would sound like begging. And I've begged enough in my life. For forgiveness. For second chances. For a seat at the table again. And I told myself, don't make things harder for her. Don't embarrass your granddaughter. Don't stir up trouble for your daughter, not again. So I stayed quiet. I didn't call the principal. I didn't post about it online. I didn't try to rally anyone to my side. I just disappeared. Like they asked me to. And every time I wanted to say something, I'd picture my granddaughter in class, her cheeks red because someone mentioned her weird grandpa. I imagined the pain she'd feel if she had to pick sides between me and her school, or me and her mom. And I couldn't do that to her. So I swallowed my hurt. Bit down on every word that burned in my throat. Nodded along when people acted like I'd simply stopped showing up. Because sometimes, love means staying silent, even when it breaks you in half. Even when no one sees your silence for what it is, a sacrifice. I used to believe love could fix anything. That if you loved someone deeply enough, fiercely enough, constantly enough, it would be enough. To rebuild bridges. To heal wounds. To change how people see you. I loved my granddaughter like that. With a kind of quiet desperation. Not just because she was sweet, or funny, or bright, but because she gave me purpose. She made me feel like I still had something good left to give this world. And I loved my daughter, too. Even when she pushed me away. Even when she didn't return calls for weeks. Even when she spoke to me like I was a burden she didn't ask for. I told myself, she's just stressed. She's just tired. I made excuses because that's what love does, it waits. It hopes. But love, I've learned, doesn't always redeem you in other people's eyes. It doesn't erase your past. It doesn't silence rumors, or override fear, or undo choices made behind closed doors. It doesn't guarantee you a seat at the next school play. It doesn't protect you from being left out, quietly, permanently. And that's the part that stays with me. I gave my heart fully, with no conditions. And somehow, it still wasn't enough to be trusted. Not even enough to be told the truth. I wasn't dangerous. I wasn't unstable. I wasn't inappropriate. I was just inconvenient. Too complicated. Too risky. Too hard to explain. So they chose silence over discomfort. Distance over repair. Absence over love. The spring recital came and went. I knew the date. I always did. I still had the school's calendar saved on my fridge, a magnet holding it in place like I was still part of something. The night of the show, I sat in my car. Not at the school. Not in the parking lot. I parked 3 blocks away, in front of a shuttered bakery. I could see the glow of the school gymnasium lights from where I sat. I imagined the folding chairs, the buzz of chatter, the smell of cheap coffee in styrofoam cups. I imagined her backstage, fixing her bow, nervously clutching her sheet music or whatever prop the teacher gave her. I pictured her scanning the crowd, just like she used to, looking for that third row seat. And this time, finding it empty. She probably thought I'd forgotten. Or maybe she didn't expect me at all. Maybe they told her I was busy, or sick, or away. I'll never know what she felt that night. But I know what I felt. Like a ghost. Like I still existed, but not in the places that mattered anymore. I sat in that car for nearly an hour, listening to nothing. Just the wind brushing against the window, the occasional passing car, the thud of my own heart in my ears. And when the lights finally dimmed in the gym, and the doors opened and parents spilled out with flowers and phones and laughter, I drove home. Quietly. Slowly. Like someone leaving a funeral with no body, and no one else in mourning. Because something did die that night. Not just a tradition. Not just a routine. But a presence. A connection. And it was the kind of loss that doesn't make the news, doesn't get a memorial, doesn't even get spoken out loud. It just vanishes. People think the hardest part is being told you're not welcome. But it's not. The hardest part is the not knowing. Not knowing what she's performing this semester. Not knowing if she looked for me in the crowd. Not knowing if she asked about me afterward, or if they changed the subject and moved on. Not knowing if she misses me at all. Because children don't always have the words for loss, not the kind that's quiet. The kind you can't explain. And what hurts the most isn't being left out. It's the fear that maybe, just maybe, she's learning to live without me. That the space I once filled in her life is being painted over, little by little. That my seat in the audience is now just a chair. That my name is said less and less. That the stories we used to share are being replaced by silence, or worse, by something ugly whispered in its place. It hurts to imagine her hearing things about me. Things she can't understand. Things I can't defend. It hurts to know she might be growing up thinking I just stopped showing up. That I chose not to be there. When the truth is, I was erased. Not loudly. Not with anger. But with quiet agreements and polite messages and closed-door decisions. And the people who did it. They still get to be in the audience. They still get to clap. While I sit here, with all this love and nowhere to put it. That's what hurts the most. There are things I should have said a long time ago. To my daughter. To myself. I never apologized the right way, not for the late nights, not for the cold silences, not for being the kind of father who showed up too late, too proud, too unsure of how to be soft. I thought fixing it through my granddaughter would be enough. That if I showed up for her, if I loved her loudly and without fail, it would somehow heal the past. But maybe what my daughter needed wasn't just proof that I'd changed. Maybe she needed to hear me say the words, "I'm sorry." Not just for what I did, but for what I didn't do. The hugs I never gave. The birthday cards I missed. The way I made her feel small when she needed to feel safe. I used to think apologies were only for people who did something unforgivable. But now I see they're for the people still carrying the weight of what we left unsaid. I should have looked her in the eye and said it, not defensively, not with explanations. Just honestly. Because maybe then, when the school sent that email, she would have remembered the man who said, "I was wrong, and I'm trying." Not the man who disappeared when she was 10. Maybe the silence wouldn't have been so easy for her to agree to. But I missed my moment. And now all I can do is sit with the words still stuck in my chest, too late to heal, too heavy to ignore. If I could have just 5 minutes with her, alone, away from the noise, the grown-up whispers, the rules and reasons, I'd keep it simple. I wouldn't try to explain everything. I wouldn't speak badly about her mom, or the school, or anyone else. I'd just kneel down, look her in the eyes, and say, "I didn't stop coming because I wanted to. I stopped because I was asked to. But I never stopped loving you." I'd tell her I still remember how she waved from the stage with one hand while holding her glittery costume together with the other. I'd tell her how I still keep her crayon drawings in a box in my closet, how I still listen to the voicemail she left me after her first dance recital, how I still buy flowers on the days I know she has performances, out of habit, or hope, I'm not even sure anymore. I'd tell her that none of this, none of it, is her fault. That grown-ups sometimes make choices out of fear, out of pain, out of old wounds they never dealt with. And that sometimes, when they do, the people who love the most get left behind. I want her to know that even if she doesn't see me clapping from the audience, I'm still clapping. Every time she tries. Every time she gets on that stage. Every time she dares to be seen. And if she ever wants to find me, all she has to do is look. Because I never really left. There's an old wooden chair in my garage. It's scratched up, the paint's chipped, and the cushion's faded from sunlight. But I can't bring myself to throw it away. It's the chair I always brought with me when the auditorium ran out of seats. The one I used at outdoor school events, spring concerts on the lawn, birthday parties in the park. It's her chair. Or maybe it's mine. Either way, I keep it clean. I dust it off now and then. I even tighten the screws when they come loose, like I'm preparing it for something. For someone. Because a part of me still believes she'll want me back someday. Not because she needs me to bring flowers or clap the loudest. But because she'll remember that I was always there. And if that day ever comes, if I hear a knock on the door, or see a message pop up that says, "Grandpa, are you home?" I'll be ready. I'll pull out the chair. I'll make tea. I'll listen. Because love doesn't expire. And no door, no decision, no distance can erase what's real. To anyone out there who's felt something similar. If you've ever been pushed to the side, misunderstood, or quietly erased, just know, you're not alone. And maybe, just maybe, your chair doesn't have to stay empty forever either.